Welcome to the complete animation of Kanga. This will be the longest video I've ever provided live commentary for, ever. um, so when I made this video, it took me probably 2 weeks working many hours, and I ended up getting repetitive stress injuries in my right hand. And since then, I've had to use a different mouse, an ergonomic mouse with a thumb trackball to edit my videos to keep from getting injured like that again. But yeah, this video is probably the most ambitious one I've ever made, and it probably would have been even more ambitious if I had done what I do with my videos now, where in addition to cutting to the bits where the footage is, I also cut out, I crop into the character. I didn't do it for this video, and I kind of wish I had, because there's so much of the screen that isn't the character, and in addition to helping to make my case for things being fair use by cropping into the character I'm focusing on, I think it's just a better thing in general as well. Really just say that this is the character that I'm focusing on. Yeah. But, let's talk about the appearance of Kanga in the original Winnie the Pooh shorts, and then in the compilation, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. This was back when animation was the most traditional that you could ever hope to get. It's literally just transparent cells with ink and paint that are then laid on top of background layers. In fact, if you look close at the outlines of the characters, you can see sort of basically shadows of just seeing how the cell is laid over the background layer. And there is a ton of charm to this, old form of doing animation. And it's something that I don't know if we'll ever see again, because modern hand-drawn stuff is all done in computers. I remember watching one of the artists behind the game Cuphead talk about how for doing his drawings, he would do it all on paper. So he'd do traditional paper animation, but then when it came to do inking and coloring, they would all do that in computers after they scanned it all in. He said that doing inking and coloring, basically doing all the stuff that you take and put it onto the cells, it's not worth it. And so with that in mind, I think that we will probably never see animation in the way that, the original Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh was animated in. But it's surprising how little Kanga actually does in basically all of the Winnie the Pooh franchise. Yeah, I'll talk more about that later when I get into my philosophy about Winnie the Pooh. You know, what the show should be, um, the things that it means to me. But yeah, the art style of Winnie the Pooh is something very unique. One of the biggest things that you see is the juxtaposition of these very, very cartoony characters, with, you know, basically a cartoon rendition of stuffed animals brought to life. But it's all on top of background layers that have a very grounded sort of aesthetic. The trees in the Hundred Acre Wood have a very distinct art style, and you wouldn't think that these, very cartoony characters would mesh very well with it, but they really do. These characters that are straight cartoons really do belong in this world of grounded backgrounds. It's very interesting. And even in the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, the TV series that started in the late 80s, they were able to really capture that. Although it is interesting, they changed the color of Kanga's pouch in the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. In basically every other one of her appearances, her pouch is the same color as, like, her belly, I guess. I don't know. But in the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, they make her pouch be the same color as, the same brown color as the rest of her fur. Yeah. This scene here, where they put on a Valentine's Day show for Christopher Robin, is, I think, one of the only times that we ever see Kanga wearing clothes. Beyond, like shawls or something. Yeah. I guess I might as well get into it right now. My philosophy about Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is at its best when it just focuses on the main cast of characters in the Hundred Acre Wood. When it goes into like fantastical settings, even if it's like make believe in characters' minds, I think that is like as fun as those times, especially in the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, as fun as those times can be. I think that the show really is at its best when it is just characters in the real world in the Hundred Acre Wood. And the Hundred Acre Wood itself is like as important to the series as basically any of the characters. The Hundred Acre Wood is, in my mind, totally removed from reality. I think that the movie Christopher Robin, I think that even though I didn't really like that movie that much and thought it had a bunch of problems meshing with my idealized version of Winnie the Pooh, I think that it had the right idea to have the Hundred Acre Wood only be accessible basically through a portal into another world. And doing that shows that the Hundred Acre Wood itself is completely separated, removed from our reality. It is a different reality, and the 100-Acre Wood is the entirety of that reality, where nothing exists outside it. Characters never leave it. Yeah. And so when like the way that I sort of reconcile that with things that have been shown is just prefer to ignore it. Like in the original Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, it shows like a high overview of the 100-Acre Wood, and it shows that there are like cottages and farmland around. But then you'll notice that, the series never really leans into that visual that you see. And I think it's because the creators sort of came to the same conclusion that I did, that the 100-Acre Wood is not part of the real world. There are no other people. The only things that exist in the 100-Acre Wood are the characters of the show and the forest itself. And I think that that is just a beautiful fantasy. It's so removed from reality, but at the same time, it is so grounded in it. It's hard to explain, but the just the world that Winnie the Pooh takes place in is so appealing. And even if there are problems that happen in there, it's a place that you would definitely want to visit. Maybe even live forever in. Who knows? But yeah, let's talk about the characters that live in the 100-Acre Wood. In my mind, the characters in the cast of Winnie the Pooh should never really learn lessons. Like, they should never evolve. Character arcs should be more about just the adventures they have and not so much about the changes that take place in the characters. And so that's one of the narrative reasons that I think that the Tigger movie is a little weaker, because it's all about a character arc. And I think that that doesn't really belong in Winnie the Pooh. I think that any character explorations that take place in Winnie the Pooh should be about showing more of who a character is and less about the character becoming something. Because you'll notice that if you watch any part of the adventures in the 100-Acre Wood, there's no chronology. The stories could take place at any time relative to one another. You could watch anything in any order, and it all makes sense because of that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of how the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh seemed so bent on introducing new characters. With things like the Heffalump family or Kessie the bird. It's like, as enjoyable as those stories may be, I just don't think that they mesh with the way that I think that the 100-Acre Wood should be portrayed. And a bunch of the time, those characters, especially like Kessie the blue bird, her entire purpose was to create like a narrative arc for Rabbit. An arc where Rabbit changes. And I just don't think that that's what this show needs. Yeah. But the Tigger movie, the film that's on screen right now, is interesting because I think this is one of the first times to show what modern Winnie the Pooh looks like with more modern tools. Um, I'm not sure how much of this one was drawn onto physical media and how much of it was done with computers, but um, from a purely visual standpoint, the Tigger movie does a great job. Yeah, and this scene where, everybody's pretending to be Tiggers to make him feel better, it's another one of those things that, like, as enjoyable as the narrative is, I just, I don't think that it really belongs in this world. Um, the my favorite episodes of the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh are things where it's just the like the time when the gang went out for a camp out, and some of them fell down Gopher's tunnels and thought that they were on the moon and they were looking for moon honey. Like, that's a story that has basically no lasting impact. It only no characters really changed. Yeah, I think that's where Winnie the Pooh is at its strongest. And so the Tigger movie, I think, was an experiment to see what happens if we take these characters and stretch the possible storylines to their absolute limits. Try to make it as epic as a Winnie the Pooh can be. And I think that that narrative just doesn't super belong. Even if I enjoy it, I think that it's not what this franchise needs. And so, yeah, I think that obviously the 2011 Winnie the Pooh got it right. The 2011 Winnie the Pooh is a masterpiece. It completely understands what the franchise needed. It completely understood what sort of story would be good to tell, and it did it all while referencing earlier works. Yeah, people make fun of George Lucas saying that Star Wars is like poetry and that things should rhyme. Winnie the Pooh really is that. Winnie the Pooh really is a show that it is a franchise that's all about just constantly semi rehashing things that have already been done with new twists. I don't know. I feel like I'm like talking in circles, somewhat contradicting myself, but like really, this franchise is something special. And the film that's on the screen now, Piglet's Big Movie, I think it falls into some of the same traps that the Tigger movie did, trying to tell a more epic story, and like do something with a character that doesn't really need it. Like, did we really need a narrative that was all about Piglet? I don't know. And that leads me to one of the questions that has been on my mind for over a year now, and that is, what would a movie all about Kanga be like? Um, It shouldn't change anything about the character. It shouldn't make her into something that she's not. But at the same time, it should explore sides of her that we've never seen before. And so, if there was going to be a movie all about Kanga, the way that I would want to do it is look at Kanga and think, what is it about Kanga that we have seen already? And the answer, of course, is we've seen a lot of her being Rue's mother. In fact, I'd say that the character's basically been pigeonholed into that role. And she does it perfectly. Like, Kanga's like the best mom that Rue could ever ask for. But if there was going to be a movie about Kanga, and you wanted to explore things about her, then the way that I think that it would be best done would be to take away the one thing that she's known for and see who she is after that. So, remove Rue from the equation and see who Kanga is without Rue. I don't know how exactly that would be best done. Maybe a show that is reminiscent of The Search for Christopher Robin, where potentially Rue and Tigger go off on an adventure that leads them to end up getting thrown to the very fringes of the 100-Acre Wood, and Kanga, who has a vested interest in recovering Rue, takes charge. And so, instead of like The Search for Christopher Robin, where Rabbit was the one who sort of took on the role of leader of the crew, it would be Kanga who tried to lead them, because she has a vested interest in recovering Rue and Tigger, who is basically like a second son to her. And so, yeah, if I were in charge of making a movie about Kanga, I would want it to be one where Rue is out of the picture for a bunch of it, because we've already seen Kanga just being, the best mom that Rue could hope for. But without Rue, we would be able to see what else about Kanga. And we see glimpses of it throughout the franchise's history. But I think that just a movie about Kanga could do wondrous things to not develop the character. She'll always be Rue's mom. She'll always be soft-spoken and kind. And that'll never change. But to show what else is she. Like, Kanga's intelligent. In fact, I'd say that she's probably the most intelligent character in the 100-Acre Wood. Like, Owl is well read, but I think that Kanga is just the most wise of them all. And so you could show that in a movie about Kanga. You could also do things like show how strong she is. Like, physically and in terms of just determination. Like, if Rue was missing, we would be able to see the lengths that Kanga would go to get him back. I think that Kanga might be a stronger bouncer than Tigger, but we've never seen a reason for her to show that. Um, so yeah, I think that a Kanga movie could not evolve the character, just show parts of the character that we've never seen before. And yeah, so the film that's showing right now is, I believe, is called Springtime with Rue, which narratively I think is probably one of the strangest feature films to ever come out in this franchise, where they basically just say, okay, we're going to tell a Christmas carol, but instead of Christmas, it's Easter. And Rabbit takes the role of Ebenezer Scrooge. And I think that that is probably the weirdest plot that you could ever do. And again, like I said before, I don't think it really meshes with the Hundred Acre Wood as idealized by me, where it is an unchanging, unflinching place with unflinching characters, and having an entire movie that's all about Rabbit learning his lesson about, disliking a certain holiday. That just has way too much character progression to really mesh with what I think is appropriate. Yeah. And so there's this era. There's different eras of the Winnie the Pooh franchise. There's the original three shorts that were then combined later into the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Then there was a one-off short called A Day for Eeyore. I think that's a weak entry. Then there was the new adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which is kind of a misnomer now that it's pretty darn old. Then there's the Tigger movie, and then after the Tigger movie came an era of animated movies that were all made by, I believe, Disney Toon Studios. And so that includes things like Piglet's Big Movie, and then this one. I misspoke earlier. This one is the Heffalump movie. And I believe this one did have a theatrical release. And I think that this is one of the shows that gets to show a little bit about what I'm talking about with Kanga, where she's the voice of reason, telling the rest of the gang not to, try to capture this heffalump. But, like I said before, I don't think that adding new characters is what Winnie the Pooh needs. And so, this show, adding the characters of the heffalump, the child heffalump and his mother, I don't think that this franchise needs to constantly be exploring new characters. As well animated as it is, like, yeah. So I really just think that the Winnie the Pooh franchise, if under my direction, would just focus on the main cast and not try to be too epic, not try to teach, super, like, whatever life lessons. And so, again, going right back to the 2011 Winnie the Pooh, that one if there was any lesson that it had, it was that Pooh was willing to sacrifice giving, um, was willing to sacrifice getting honey to help um, finish getting Eeyore his new tail. And it's like, beyond that, it's mostly just an adventure that they all go on. Things where, and that's the other thing. I think that the best stories in Winnie the Pooh are the ones where the adventures are self-inflicted, where the characters blow their imaginations out of proportion to the point where they really believe that, the sky is falling and they need to do what it takes to fix that. Or maybe, and that's like at the epic end of the spectrum. I think that it's also very good when the characters have, maybe more of a sitcom sort of a storyline where they're trying to figure out the best way to plan for another character's birthday or something. And not that always succeeds. Eeyore's Big Day did that and failed. But like the smaller scale, just inter-character stories, I think those are the storylines that are stronger. Yeah. And so this one I believe is Springtime with Rue, and I think that it's one of the weaker narratives in the entire franchise. And you'll also notice that the animation is a bit cheaper too. Like, the characters don't move as smoothly as they do in the more impressive ones. But yeah, the thing about the self-inflicted adventures is that the biggest lessons that can be learned are just the simple ones of just because you think something is the case doesn't mean that it really is. And that's a poignant lesson that, even adults could really take a page out of. Just because you think that something is the case and the people around you think it's also the case doesn't mean that that's actually how things are. And so, yeah. And I think that the best example of taking that to its limit is The Search for Christopher Robin, where everyone is convinced that Owl's cobbled together reading of a letter is how it is, and they just run with it to the point where they're willing to run to the edges of the 100-acre wood in order to rescue their friend who never needed rescuing at all, and that it was all just a misunderstanding. I think that that is a beautiful way to keep the spirit of how Winnie the Pooh should be narratively, and take it to like its limits. I think the Tigger movie failed at that, but The Search for Christopher Robin did not. And again, like, these are all just narrative things. Animation wise, they're all really good. And now we come to the 2011 Winnie the Pooh. Kanga has a bit of a redesign. Her muzzle is a little bit longer and a little more pronounced than it was in the previous iterations, where it had a more rounded sort of a thing. And you'll notice that even though this movie was completely made in computers, I doubt that anything that was drawn on paper ended up in this movie. I think it was all drawn on digital tablets. I think that it was all colored digitally. And it is a gorgeous sight to behold. Just look at this. They use the trick of having their digital brushes have some artificial roughness to them to sort of evoke the feeling of being drawn on paper. They add extra lines here and there to give it like a little bit of that feel of being a raw animation right on the paper. This movie is absolutely gorgeous, and it also happens to be the last 2D feature film made by Walt Disney Animation Studios. The one before this was 2009's Princess and the Frog. This movie, like, I honestly believe that if there was any movie that deserved to be the last one that such a legendary studio made, this movie was it. Like, I honestly can't think of a single thing I don't like about this movie. It is also hilarious. Some people have criticized that they don't like Kanga in this movie being less of an arbiter, viewing things from the outside, always being the voice of reason, and instead her being just part of the gang on their wild misadventures. But I think that is a wonderful way to get that kind of character exploration that I would have wanted in a actual Kanga movie. Because even though she's probably the wisest, she also has a bit of sass. Like right here where she says, no, I'm with child. Like, come on. That's good stuff. Like, I honestly can't say enough good things about this movie. I think it is one of the greatest movies ever made. Probably not one of the most important. Certainly not one of the most influential. But in terms of just raw quality and nailing the intellectual property that it portrays, I really think that 2011's Winnie the Pooh is one of the greatest films ever made. Like, it's not even a question. And it's a shame that this has been the last animated show that we've seen of Winnie the Pooh. There was one studio that pitched something to Disney, but after seeing the pitch, I think it's a good thing that they said no, because they were going to use a different art style. And it's not like, I don't know. I just think that this art style of Winnie the Pooh has basically just become sacrosanct. It's like, this is what animated Winnie the Pooh looks like. And to change it to be a little bit more stylized, a little more angular, a little more modern, I just don't think that is what this what this franchise needs. And so, as much as I love the studio that pitched it to Disney, I'm glad that they didn't. And hopefully one day we will see a true continuation of Winnie the Pooh as it should be. And finally, we get to Christopher Robin, the movie. I like a lot of things about this movie. I like its sort of portrayal of 1930s, or I'm not sure exactly what the time period is, but an older sort of time period in England. I I love how just earthy and down to earth the whatever the scenery is. I'm not a big fan of this live actioning of these classic characters. I really think that it really needs to be just the classic animation style. That's what these characters were made for. Um, yeah, and people group this as being as part of the live action remakes of Disney movies, but it isn't really. Not saying that that makes it any better than what it is, but it's not. And I don't like this portrayal of Kanga. She doesn't get hardly any screen time, and the screen time that she does get just shows how a sort of a realistic stuffed animal character isn't what this show needs, isn't what this franchise needs. I loved Ewan McGregor. Ewan McGregor is just a gem in all the roles he plays. But yeah, so this has been the longest commentary I've ever given on something, and I spent most of it talking about how I feel that this franchise deserves to be made, and where I feel that its shortcomings are. Um, I didn't provide so much on the actual animation itself, but that's just the nature of this video. Thanks for sticking around, and thank you for watching.